I know there were a handful of us of the chamber directors that were not on the call. So if they had anything that they wanted to add, please feel free to do that. One thing.
We're here with you, Jen.
Thank you. One thing that we wanted to let everybody know that an area of concern is cash flow and PPE access. And with regard to cash flow and access to that, we'd like to reiterate what they discussed on the Thursday call, is that the Grand Rapids Chamber had a fund that was available, that they've collected resources from the community and made available. And we'd like to continue to make that available to the community and small business owners. We have another point touch point is that the small micro-sized businesses, the areas of 1 to 5 employees, don't have as much access to funds as the, say, 5 to 20 size business or the larger businesses. So that's a concern for us in supporting our members. And chambers in specific also are having a difficult time accessing resources because we're a 501c6 and we are not eligible because most of the resources that are available are to 501c3 nonprofits and the for-profit sectors. So those are a few points of discussion that we have had.
All right.
Jennifer, if I may, Bob O'Callahan from the Wyoming-Kentwood Chamber.
Hi, Bob.
We're doing a lot of the same things. We feel that our most important part of this whole thing is the information. We've got several sources we use to put out information to businesses to help on the financial and the other. I thought it was kind of hilarious to me that some of the information we get is not accurate. So we've had to fact check everything before we send out to the membership. So, and we are also putting all of our members that are open for business on our website and on our Facebook page. And ones that will be opening when this is done, we'll do the same thing for. So we're trying to get as much information and much openings out there as we can.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Sandy. I'm the executive director with the Caledonia Area Chamber. Just want to say thanks for the Board of Commissioners inviting us in and trying to collaborate and see what's going on there locally with some of the outskirts of Grand Rapids too. I really appreciate the invite to be here. I'll just run through a couple of the questions that you presented for us to answer. You asked what our organizations are doing to help businesses in response to the current crisis. Same as a couple of the others mentioned already, we've been kind of transferring over to hosting virtual events, both informational and networking events. The information, as Bob mentioned, is hard to sift through, making sure that we're giving our members viable information all in one place so that they don't have to go and pick the pieces and parts from here and there, because that's a really hard task. So we're trying to bring that together. We have hosted through Caledonia a virtual town hall, kind of bringing in questions, financial questions, lawyers, you know, that sort of thing. And also providing networking opportunities so that businesses can keep connecting with their peers, you know, for not only for business reasons, but just for mental reasons, and supporting each other through this time to keep sharing ideas and how to move forward. So our most recent event on that note was our multi-chamber connected chamber women event. We brought in a speaker for that on the topic of mindfulness, just helping people deal with the stress and anxiety of all of this as well. So now we're gearing towards kind of the hey, can we be open? What funds are out there? What, you know, how do we navigate through this? Now we're kind of switching gears to how do we start navigating what reopening looks like? So this coming Thursday, the Caledonia Chamber is hosting a webinar gearing up to reopen. And we're bringing in a speaker from the Small Business Development Center to speak on tips and tricks of what businesses should be doing to communicate with the public now on how they're preparing to invite them back into their places of business, as well as, again, a local attorney to answer the legal side of that, make sure we're compliant, following the rules that are in place. What level of support do we anticipate will be needed to sustain businesses through the balance of this calendar year? It's a hard question. The Caledonia Chamber, we represent about 135 business members, so we're a very small chamber. We did conduct a survey about 4 weeks ago, and we determined that 84% of our member businesses at that time had been impacted financially due to COVID-19. I'm sure that number has possibly risen by now. 4 weeks means a lot in the business world. But they requested our chamber through that survey also to keep connecting them with funding sources that are viable, both local, state, and federal, which we have been doing, and encouraging our chamber to keep connecting them with the community, encouraging the public to support local more now than ever before, to keep our businesses in business, and excuse me, also give them communication outlets with their peers.
Okay, great. Anyone else have anything to share today?
I'm Heather with Granville Jennison Chamber.
Hi, Heather.
And I just want to reiterate what my colleague said. I mean, it's a tough time for everybody, and I want to thank you for having us. But one other point that we mentioned in our small group was the need for PPE items for the businesses as they reopen. And if there's any way to make sure they have the resources they need for those, and keeping their customers and employees safe.
Right.
For Walker Chamber, we appreciate the support of Kent County. We also appreciate the support of other local chambers because we're a smaller chamber, like Caledonia said, we're about 100. We have a lot of micro businesses that really are confused, and it's helped us immensely to talk to them one-on-one because things change minute to minute, day by day. I own a business myself, and so I know that for my business too, sorting through all of the rules and regulations and what you can and can't do in the phased openings can get really confusing. And like Bob said, we don't always get the most accurate information. We can't know everything about every business. So connecting with local chambers has been extremely helpful to us.
Right. All right, do we have any members of the subcommittee who have questions? I can kick one off while we're waiting for people to raise their hand. How did you guys coordinate? How did everyone coordinate with the Grand Rapids Area Chamber when they did stand up that private relief fund? Did that work well? Did everyone participate? How did you feel that worked for outlying areas of the county?
Person, I just want to let you know that I'm here on behalf of Rick Baker. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, Omar. Thanks for joining us. But my question was for the other chambers. Was that kind of coordinated? Did you feel that worked well? Does anyone have any comments? Or
We were not involved in that. That was kind
Okay.
of the Grand Rapids Chamber, the
Okay.
West Michigan Hispanic Chamber, and a couple of the chambers in Muskegon.
Okay.
Yeah. By the time we received information about the funds that were there, it was almost too late for any of our members to access.
Okay.
I'm Megan Dean with the Rockford Chamber of Commerce, and I will second that. By the time that we found out the information, by the time we would have gotten it to our chamber members, the funding or the opportunity was already, it was
Right.
too late to pass that on. So unfortunately, I think with the smaller communities on the outskirts of Grand Rapids, it was just too late to get that information out, but everything's changing and everything moves so fast right now.
Right.
It just needed to be coordinated a little
Okay.
more, where maybe the executives of each chamber would be involved.
Okay. Yeah, I just had wondered. I know that the Grand Rapids Chamber just did so much work to get that up and running and done quickly. And I know as a county, we represent the whole county. So a lot of our members, especially here, even on the subcommittee, represent you all on the call today in our individual districts. So we want to be sure that kind of moving forward, we are able to continue to coordinate and increase those efforts to really reach out to the whole community and the whole county as well. It looks like we have someone from the Cedar Springs Chamber on the call who did want to address us as well. We don't have a name.
I'm on as well as Dawn, the Cedar Spring Chamber of Commerce I'm one of the trustees. I used to be the president, but Dawn Rayburn's also on. She's our vice president of communications. Right now, the only thing that we've had an opportunity to work with is getting feedback from people how we can help promote that they're still existing and what their hours and stuff. We, as far as I know of, didn't know anything about there being any funding through the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce for assistance.
Yeah, and it was their own private fund. I did kind of how that worked. So, okay. Commissioner Talon has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Wanted to follow up with the question I asked earlier this week, or last week, I guess, of the Grand Rapids Chamber, and that's to ask whether there is an anticipation of a need for childcare for employees as businesses begin to open up. I have a sense that that's going to be a significant issue, but wondering if others have any input to the committee about that.
Omar, do you want to address that?
Absolutely, yeah, we are seeing some of those concerns pop up. Obviously, that is the top of mind issue as businesses are looking to come back. We're looking for guidance, first of all, in making sure that we're coming back to work safe, but additionally, knowing that there's going to be some restrictions with childcare and childcare facilities, maybe limitations on capacity. We're still looking for some guidance on what it is that the need's going to be, and then figure out with some partners what potentially are some possible optimal solutions as well. So that is a top of mind concern that we have internally as well.
Appreciate that. Wondering if there's any feedback from the other chambers that are here today, if they have had any conversations about that.
Well,
Yeah,
we've heard people that are going back to work now. They're not sure they can use the daycare. It's been very unclear. As Omar said, we're looking for some guidance. Who can be at daycare at this point? So with more businesses open every day, folks are struggling to find out if they can use their daycare they've used forever.
Right, I think especially with the micro business, the business owners of smaller businesses, with no school, they don't have any guidance on what they can do for childcare. School is one thing, childcare, where does that stand now? We have no idea.
Right. Commissioner Talon, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no answer. Just was looking for some
Right.
feedback from anybody that had a sense of what the need is. Thank you.
Commissioner
Talon,
Womack.
I will say that I will take this back as well to make sure that our governmental affairs staff member that focuses on childcare and education can follow up as well.
I
Omar.
have spoken with Alexa. We had a long conversation. I've also spoken with people in the childcare community, just so my colleagues know. One of the biggest issues that the childcare community is concerned about is PPE, and particularly touchless thermometers that everyone's going to have, which cost $100 a pop. And with 600, 700, 800 childcare centers in Kent County, that's a pretty significant lift there, just FYI.
Okay. Commissioner Womack has a question.
Yes, I was listening as we heard from the Caledonia Chamber, Rockford Chamber, Cedar Springs Chamber. So I may not can allocate to which chamber said this, but one of the chambers mentioned 84% of the businesses, of their 135 businesses that they're in contact with, have been impacted by COVID-19. So I was going to ask if any of the chambers we're talking today have received any financial support as they've been taking in information, and their chambers I definitely have a bigger workload on themselves, but I see that they're more interested in helping in those businesses that they represent. So I just want to find out if they have received any funding.
Wyoming-Kentwood has not.
No, Walker has not.
Caledonia.
Campbell Jennison has not either.
Rockford Chamber is not.
Iron Center has not.
Cedar Chamber has not either.
Wow.
The chamber has not either, and actually we have 30% of our staff right now on furlough. Still keeping up with the workload that we currently have by reallocating staff and what they're working on these days.
Well, thank you, because hopefully somehow, either locally, statewide, federally, or at our table, hopefully somehow this can change. But I do thank you for your presentation today. And I just heard a lot of valuable information, and it's great, even as being a commissioner, to know that your chambers can be resources for us to know what our businesses are going through out here during the COVID-19 pandemic. So thank you very much as we continue this presentation. This is Commissioner Womack. I just wanted to jump in and thank you for your presentation while I had a chance.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Womack. It looks like we have a question from Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Morgan?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Seems to me as we move along in this process, and if we're able to set something up with a given chamber, we really need to improve our networking with the various chambers throughout the county, so they all have first line access and information as we move along. So it just strikes me that we really need to improve our communications with the chambers and how we are going to handle the money or disbursements of grants or whatever as we move along. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Morgan. It looks like Commissioner Breivy did want to make a comment. Or I'll just read it in the chat. We did stand up, Kent County Health Department, along with some various partners in the community, did stand up a KentCountyBackToWork.com kind of a resource and a website. Wayman might be able to talk more about it, but it does talk about employee health screenings and no-touch thermometers, and as a resource for businesses to get PPE. So we did want to mention that as well. And I just appreciate you all joining us today. I appreciate, though this is a crisis, we have had it's presented an opportunity for all of us to pull in and pull together and interact, which we probably wouldn't have done otherwise. So I really appreciate you all bringing forth what you're seeing on the ground and bringing it to our attention. As always, we are your commissioners and we want to hear from you at any time, and not as much in this formal setting. So we're here for you. We appreciate you, and we appreciate your information. And moving forward, we're going to continue to use you as a resource for what you're seeing and hearing and how we can be helpful. So with that, I don't see any more hands. I appreciate your time today, and we're going to move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is our area foundations and United Way response to COVID and our local nonprofits. It looks like we have Julie Ridenour from Steelcase Foundation, Michelle Van Dyke from United Way, and Diana Seeger from Grand Rapids Community Foundation, all here today. Who would like to go first? Maybe I'll ask Michelle.
No, this is Diana Seeger.
Diana. Hi, Diana.
Hi. Chair Bolter, thank you so much. And commissioners, appreciate this opportunity. And County Administrator Britt, this is a wonderful opportunity to not only share what we've been doing, but also to several calls to action for your consideration. Michelle Van Dyke, Julie Ridenour, and I, along with our Vice President for Programs at the Community Foundation, Kate Schmid, who has provided some great information for us. I just want you to know that your philanthropic sector has been standing alongside the county for decades and has accomplished a great deal working together. So this isn't new. This is not a new behavior. The philanthropic sector was instrumental in helping to shape the Kent County Family and Children's Coordinating Council back in the mid-1990s. In fact, the Community Foundation was the initial administrator of the Coordinating Council, and we knew that it needed ultimately to rest with the Board of Commissioners, though. Michelle, Julie, and I, along with other foundation leaders, serve on the Coordinating Council and have worked with you on other major efforts to advocating on state funding. And Many miles have been logged on our cars on our trips to Lansing, advocating for equitable funding for mental health services as well as for other human services. We've partnered with the county on many efforts over the course of decades, including the formation of the Kent School Services Network, the Early Childhood Health efforts, K-Connect, and much, much more. Our recent journey responding to this pandemic has reinforced the strength of the philanthropic sector in Kent County. The bond between foundations and the United Way is stronger than ever before. We are collaborative and will remain collaborative beyond this crisis. Prior to this time, a larger group of foundations have met monthly as we've done for the past 30 years. And the foundations that are involved in the smaller group, including the United Way, are the Fry, Weggy, Jander Noah, DeVos Family Foundations, Peter and Emma Jean Cook, the KRW Foundation, Steelcase, WK Kellogg Foundations, and Amway Corporation, and the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. Our larger group has been involved as well, but this was the core group. So we're using a frame that you'll hear repeated in this presentation of what was in front of us 10 weeks ago. That's when we came together as a smaller group. We were looking at the immediate, the now, as we called it, and then ultimately the near and the long term. So we're moving into the time frame now of the near, and then we're setting the parameters for what may occur over the long term. We were intentional about acting as the bridge, and I just want to repeat that, as the bridge between the philanthropic sector and the larger dollars that you now have the responsibility to distribute. We set out to address the human crisis, and we were moved to respond in new and different ways. Not just funding to nonprofits, but also providing funding for some of our small businesses to stay afloat. We recognized early on that we couldn't use traditional strategies and processes. The battle is just too big and too relentless. We had to change our approach. So our first response in those first few weeks was for emergencies. And we had history with this back in the beginning days of the recession. A group of foundations got together and created an emergency fund as well. That was child's play compared to what we're experiencing now. Our first response was obviously for emergencies, and so more than the funding, we adjusted our current grant arrangements to provide greater leeway for our nonprofit partners. And we were so pleased and happy to work with the Heart of West Michigan United Way, which you'll hear about in a moment, in their creation immediately of the Coronavirus Response Fund at the United Way. As foundations, we did provide greater leeway for our nonprofit partners to respond, as well as to trying to keep their financial conditions as strong as possible. We advanced payments on multi-year commitments. We turned program-specific funding into general operating support. In many cases, the foundations exceeded their budgeted payouts for the year. We've allocated resources through phone conversations, emails, and short forms rather than lengthy proposals. We also found ways of providing direct cash assistance to members of our community. It's what our community needs from us. This pandemic is impacting our community in ways we could never have imagined. It requires a relentless, reflective, and adapting response. We knew it was imperative that we swiftly responded with great flexibility. I estimate that those foundations named in the smaller group have expended more than $12 million in our emergency responses in the last 10 weeks. So I'd like to ask now Michelle Van Dyke to take you through the United Way's response and, frankly, her swift response to the devastating impact of the COVID-19 virus. So next slide, please.
Actually, Pam, you can go one more. Thank you, Diana. I just want to talk a little bit about what Diana stood up as kind of our now response, the emergency response to this pandemic. And as Diana stated, the partnership between Heart of West Michigan United Way and the local and other funders has been, I think, historic in terms of we've just never seen a partnership like this before as a response to any emergency. We came together very quickly along with the Essential Needs Task Force and understanding what the needs were of the community. We very quickly set up the fundraising efforts, and the slide says we raised over $2 million. We're actually over $3.3 million as of last night.
Sorry.
Pam, could we move the other phones, Pam?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
People weren't muted. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem. We've raised over $3.3 million through last night for the Coronavirus Response Fund. And then we brought live a grant application right after the pandemic started. And I think what's really unusual about this is that, as Diana said, we had to think very innovatively about how we were going to do our grant process. It had to be different. And then I'll also mention too that the grants that we were accepting are for the purpose of meeting the emergency basic needs of the community members due to COVID-19. These are not dollars that are going to nonprofits for operating expenses, truly for the basic needs of the community. So Pam, you can advance. I want to just talk a little bit about this process that we put in place. It's swift, and you can see here from a donor's gift to the client in need really is within a total of 48 hours. So grant applications come in, as Diana said, they are simplified. We ask 5 or 6 questions. The grant application comes into us. We decision it within 24 hours. And then the funds are in the nonprofit's hands within an additional 24 hours. So this is something that this community has never seen before in terms of the swift and impactful response that we've had to this crisis. So one more, Pam. You can see here numbers actually through last Thursday. I'll give you numbers through last night. We have granted just over $2.6 million to 179 different awards to about 140 nonprofits through last night. So there is money going out into the community very, very quickly. Pam, next slide, you'll see where the money is going and where these awards are heading. Food, housing, transportation, PPE and safety equipment. Many of the awards are a combination of needs. You can see here almost $1 million in food. That has been the #1 reason for calls into 211 since this crisis began. But I will tell you that as a percentage of the total number of calls, this is declining, and we're seeing increases in calls for housing as well as income support. Those are #2 and #3. And I will also add that services, mental and behavioral health services, and the need for those are also climbing as a percentage of our calls. We're aligning very closely with the areas of need when we talk about funding, and we monitor that primarily through 211. We've taken over 8,000 calls to 211 in the month of April alone, and that's a 52% increase from April of last year, and we expect those levels to continue at least through the end of this calendar year. But of course, the reasons are changing, the reasons for the calls, and we watch that very, very carefully. Housing is the #1 unmet need. And so what does that mean? It means that when people call into us, we currently do not have the resources available to meet the need of the caller. So we measure unmet needs, and housing is the #1 at unmet need right now. Pam, if you go to the next slide, I'll just show quickly, this is kind of the cadence of how the grants have come in. We set this up on a 30-day cycle, and you can see initially we had kind of the onslaught of requests, which you would imagine. In the fourth week, we kind of bounce up, 305,000. We actually opened food back up. We had found that the agencies that were requesting dollars for 30 days worth of food were actually going through that food in about 8 days. So we had to open that back up to get money back into their hands. You can see we're really now down to a trickle in terms of the requests that are coming in for this phase of the funding. And I'm working with right now our foundation and funding partners to really go into what we would call a phase 2 of the Coronavirus Response Fund. As Diana kind of outlined, the now, near, and far, we're kind of moving more into the near and looking and honing in on what the emerging needs are in the community. And as I said, we're seeing that in housing. We're also seeing an emerging need in mental and behavioral health, and we'll focus our remaining Corona Response Fund dollars primarily into those 2 areas. And that will start at the beginning of June. So we're kind of winding down one phase into a second phase. But I will tell you, I'm particularly concerned as our moratorium on evictions lifts. We are going to see the need for housing dollars, I think, grow beyond what we're seeing today. So that remains a concern, I know, for all of us moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Julie Ridenour.
Thank you, Michelle and Diana, too. You've done a great job of laying out the now, near, and far structure that we adopted early as funders for our framework. And you also heard, I think, that one of the most nagging and persistent needs that has been addressed and needs to continue to be addressed in the near and the far is that of housing and homelessness. This crisis, both from a health perspective and an economic perspective, has further opened the door to expansion of those issues. And what we knew pre-COVID and what we understand to a greater extent since is that the face of those without permanent shelter has shifted in recent years from single individuals to families, and particularly those families headed by single mothers. Across the county, it's estimated that nearly 3 out of 100 students in the Kent Intermediate School District are living in a state of homelessness, and that includes doubling up at friends' homes and at family homes, those in motels, those in shelters, transitional or unsheltered circumstances, and that this is an issue that affects every school district in the county, every township in the county, every village and city within the county, whether directly or indirectly. Additionally, as I've alluded to, there's a glaring issue of equity in homelessness, the circumstances disproportionately affecting people of color. Roughly 60% of Kent County's homeless population is represented by persons of color. And in family shelters, almost 80% of those in family shelters are persons of colors. It's a much higher rate of disproportionality for families than for singles. Since COVID-19's arrival, we've assessed the range of responses to housing instability, from referrals, intake, to diversion, prevention, to shelter and congregant care, to shelter in motels and hotels, to permanent housing. And every step of that continuum of responses right now is stressed, and particularly those latter 3 responses. You heard Michelle also talk about Heart of West Michigan's United Way's responses to the requests that they've received through 211, and the inability basically to find solutions for housing needs in the community. And Diana describing how the funders came together in this early days of this emergency to help Heart of West Michigan United Way centralize the response and address the initial needs, and then consider now the future needs of the community as well. Before COVID-19, housing instability and homelessness in Kent County occurred, like many other parts of the country, this was the most pressing human need challenge we had. It's even more so today. And the pandemic has aggravated that wound in our social structure and created an even larger challenge, which crosses the thresholds of human services, education, mental health, business, and health systems. If it isn't among the County of Kent's highest priorities, its level and impact across the region merits the attention needed to apply every systemic and equitable response tool that Kent County has available. Addressing number 2, the leveraging of community expertise here. We know you've had some of the participants in this speak to you. We encourage you to further draw upon the expertise of these community resources to develop an approach that, while recognizing the emergent needs arising out of COVID-19, also digs into the systemic nature of the circumstances and responds in ways that will help to close these gaps that challenge so many other systems. From school leaders to mental health workers to hospital leaders to our largest city and smallest towns, homelessness affects every fiber of the whole cloth of Kent County, and it requires a response that only an entity of the size, scope, and resources held by the County of Kent can adequately address. Here's just a short list of some of those deeply embedded in homelessness, some of whose voices have already been heard from you and others who could be called upon as resources. Michelle and the Heart of West Michigan United Ways 211, they can match real-time data and information with your funding decisions as the weeks and months progress. The K-Connect Housing Accountability Partnership will make recommendations on June 30th to address some of these systemic needs. The Continuum of Care, similarly, has extensive expertise across the breadth of the homeless system. The Essential Need Task Force subcommittees has been addressing both housing and food needs and should be called upon. And we also encourage you to seek continuous feedback from people with the lived experience as they navigate this crisis. We've seen other efforts done locally, like eviction interventions at the district court level in Grand Rapids and Kentwood, that could be implemented in courts throughout the county to address what we think will be the next wave of the crisis when rent abeyance ends in the not too distant future. Can a county-wide response be developed for this tested and successful practice that has demonstrated itself of benefit to both landlords and tenants? Similarly, does this pandemic situation call for the adoption of a practice that has been tested and proven in larger American cities with the leadership of their counties to use housing navigators to move people quickly into longer-term housing solutions? The use of navigators has proven to work locally for successfully addressing healthcare needs. Can Kent County draw upon this local and national knowledge to develop a navigation system that addresses both housing and homelessness? Then could these practices be combined with policy on a county-wide basis that looks at housing practices that are impediments to both equity and finding longer-term solutions for those who find themselves looking at homelessness? And finally, how is Kent County helping to educate tenants and landlords throughout the area on the possibilities of uses for the federal voucher program? More can be done on every front. While recognizing that emergency responses to homelessness are never likely to go away, we'll always likely need shelters, how can Kent County use this crisis to step more fully into long-term responses to one of the largest challenges the county has to making Kent County an attractive place to live for all residents? Much as the county has so successfully managed its financial assets, we implore the county leaders to engage in this critical issue of human lives and assets and leverage the resources provided by COVID-19 to their full force by approaching the problem from a long-term perspective rather than just stopgap measures. We encourage you to have your responses also address the now, the near, and the far with navigation assistance, rental assistance, and eviction intervention, among others, to provide the systems approach this COVID fuel situation requires. We also implore you not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We know human lives are involved. That's always messy, but we think we have the resources and the smarts in this in Kent County to address these problems successfully. Thank you.
All right, thank you ladies so much. You're obviously doing yeoman's work, and we really appreciate some of the ideas brought forward. One of the challenges we are going to have with this funding and finance today, I'm sure you probably weren't on that call, but today in the finance committee, they did lay out a lot of different funds that are coming in that are more restricted to use for housing and for some of the HUD regulations and some of the things that we would probably deem more essential needs. So we want to make sure that we are applying those to these needs first. The CARES money that we are going to have a challenge with has to be related to COVID response only, and it cannot fill any previously appropriated line item or revenue shortfall. So we are looking at very unique and creative ways to find some workarounds for this. So I just want to in some ways, it's great to get these funds, and we're so thankful that we have them. In other ways, we feel a little bit like our hands are tied, because I know the state of Michigan's in the same boat, where they got $3 billion of this CARES money, and they can't use it for any of the shortfalls that they're going to see at the state, which will then trigger huge cuts to the state budget. So just wanted to kind of mention that. I don't see initial chat, so I will ask a couple questions. We had a great presentation from a lot of housing leaders last week, and I do want to know, what do we do? I know before this crisis, we had an inventory issue in terms of where we were putting people. We have a system in place. We have a shelter system. We had a rapid rehousing system. We have a way to get people logistically housed, but it was my understanding we didn't have the inventory. So moving forward, how do we still address that? I mean, what are you guys seeing that we could do to address some of those, that main issue?
Julie.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
Oh, go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead.
I would just say inventory is certainly an issue. I don't know that we've got a silver bullet around that, but there are units available for rapid rehousing that we hear about. So, but it is clearly an issue. And Chair, I'm not sure we've got a silver bullet. If we did, we'd all be using it. I think one of the things though that I have observed, and I'll give you my personal observation just in being in this work for the past 4 years, is that we don't have enough emphasis on diversion and prevention and helping people stay out of homelessness. And we really need dollars focused there, especially right now, because if people are going to be losing their housing when the eviction moratorium lifts, we're in real trouble, because we have nowhere to put an influx of people who become homeless. I know that you heard this group talk about the emergency shelter and moving people out of emergency shelter into hotels because we needed to isolate them safely and be able to socially distance families. Those dollars are running out, and so we've got an emergency right now with families that are staying in hotels, and in about 9 days that money will be gone. And so we're gonna have to make some quick decisions here.
And I have two questions in that regard. The first question regarding the families is, if they've been in there for roughly a month now, why are we not moving them? And that's probably not a question for you, but
no. And there are some moving, so
okay.
we are working in coordination between the shelters and the rapid rehousing programs to to get these families housed. But to your point, Chair, we don't have a lot of units available, but as units become available, we're moving the families out.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we have families moving back in.
Okay. And then my second question, and then I do have 3 commission members who have questions. My second question is, you all have changed a lot of your processes to expedite things. If someone calls in, obviously because of this inventory issue, they currently are housed, they call 211, they basically say, hey, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent this month. What is the process in place to quickly get them rental assistance in a manner in which they won't be to the point that they're so far behind that they would get an eviction notice? So does that immediately go to, Susan Cervantes group, or does it go to Cheryl Schucker? Like, where does that go immediately? What is that quick expedited process?
Yeah, depending on the need, most go through our coordinated entry process. Salvation Army is our coordinated entry point.
Okay.
If there are other needs available or other resources available, we'll match those to those needs, for things like rental assistance. But again, our largest unmet need is housing, and a lot of it is around rental assistance. We don't have places to send people to get help. There just aren't enough resources available.
Okay. Commissioner Steck has a hand raised, then I have Talon and Womack. Commissioner Steck.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. First, I want to thank the foundations for appearing here today and for making this presentation, and also to acknowledge them and all of our philanthropic community for what they have done in stepping up in the wake of this crisis. As some of them know, our public sector isn't always the most nimble and is not always capable of addressing circumstances the way our foundations are, and I've certainly seen that in the experience with our behavioral health world. So acknowledge you for that contribution and for being there as a critical part of our community as a whole in being able to respond, not just as public entities, but as private, public, and public-private partnership entities. So thank you so much for that. Some of the questions that the chair has already raised sort of accentuates one of the challenges I think we have in this committee, and that is to ground our responses into the parameters of what these funds are designed to do. And while housing is critically going to be an issue, and it has been an issue, and it has to continue to be focused, some of the comments identified that this crisis in part highlighted an existing systemic set of issues that we need to be attentive to, but also aggravated. And the differences and the fluctuations between highlighting and aggravation are probably not clear lines in the sand. And so it's not going to be a real easy challenge for us to distinguish that. But I'll leave it to my colleagues who are more conversant in housing issues than I am, and maybe follow up on that. But I did want to follow up a little bit on the mental health. We all have seen and know that the mental health of our community has been an issue for some time, but this crisis again has a way of highlighting the deficiencies of our systems and aggravating in a significant way that and increasing the needs for how we're going to have to respond. So I'm wondering if those representatives from the foundations could maybe talk a little bit about what the specific unique needs in addressing behavioral health issues are, and how you are seeing those being responded to by your sector.
I can address a part of that, Commissioner, and again, having stood alongside of all of you and over the course of the last few years with regard to mental health and emotional health and behavioral health issues, we have all been hand-wringing together. And so one of the things that at the Community Foundation is that we're really focusing our funding at this point and now and into the future with those who are most vulnerable. And that means people who have been suffering for many, many years from the disparities brought on by race and other factors. We are really focusing our efforts in mental health funding and support to organizations such as Family Outreach Center, of making sure that we have at least some semblance of services to reach out to people who have really, I think, have suffered for quite some time, and they're using telehealth and other methods. So that's a beginning piece, but I know that we need more robust responses, and I think Network 180 is really attempting to piece some of those things together. I know that our other, one of the things that I've really appreciated about our work as a county and our work as the private nonprofit sector is the fact that we have always had a history of hand-in-hand work. And and both in policy direction, but also in joint funding. So I just think that this is already, as you've brought out, it is certainly at a crisis point, and I don't see that crisis going away anytime soon. So I don't know if Julie or Michelle have any comment.
I was just going to add, first of all, thanks to Commissioner Steck for his leadership in the mental health arena. We really appreciate the work that you've been doing with the whole collaborative effort. But also to mention the work of Kent School Services Network with mental health in the districts that they serve, and how intricate this is to success in the school realm. We know that kids who suffer trauma, and particularly those who suffer 4 or more incidents of trauma, are far less likely to succeed in school through graduation if there is not an intervention done on the mental health front. And so all of these needs are really interwoven. There's no one neat dividing line between where we address them any longer. They cross-cut virtually every sector of the community.
Yeah, this is, again, Commissioner Steck, I appreciate those comments. There is no question that our behavioral health challenges are intricately interwoven with housing, food support, and many other social issues that are being addressed, but we need to find a way of coordinating that very effectively. But they are crises that we've continued to work with, and I remain optimistic that notwithstanding the COVID environment we're currently responding to, with our partnership with our foundations, I'm optimistic that we're going to make significant progress in addressing those issues. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steck. Oh,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Diana.
I just want to make a comment. This really reinforces the importance of the Kent County Family and Children's Coordinating Council. We have worked hard for the past 30 years of really trying to strengthen that coordinating council, and so many good things have come out of that, such as the Kent School Services Network. But this is where that the coordinating council could really be of assistance too, and particularly with regard to understanding the need for stronger prevention services, which I got to tell you, I've been fighting for many, many years, not with the county, but with regard to other dollars coming in. So I would just say to all of you, the Kent County Family and Children's Coordinating Council is more important than ever before.
Thank you. Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. I want to share an observation and then ask for comments from any of the presenters this morning. Earlier this morning, I sat in on the Finance Committee meeting where there was approval, acceptance of between $1.5 and $2 million, I think, of ESG and CDBG. And I heard talk about collaboration and coordination on the use of those dollars. But what I think I know, and what I didn't hear, was that the dollars are actually being integrated into the established coordinated entry system that we have in this county. And I think that's been the history of community action, is that we've kind of not coordinated well. We've not made those resources part of the prioritization that we've been working toward for many years, that the foundations have advocated for many years. So I'm very concerned about that. I guess I wanted to hear whether foundations have any experience with that, any thoughts about that. Thank you.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll just touch briefly on it and say, yes, we always have had concerns. And I think, I've been with the Steelcase Foundation for 8 years. And I think particularly over the past 3 to 4 years, more time of mine has been spent working with the homeless situation than in any other area. It just continues to rise to the top. And I think that a big part of that is the issue we've continued to have with the coordinated system of entry. I'm hopeful that K-Connect will have a recommendation by June 30th that will address this and see people a little differently. I think one of the things we're starting to see within the community is the providers working together in a way that perhaps they haven't for a long time, in a way that is much more coordinated, and recognizing the role that each has to play upon that continuum of care. It is bringing out some opportunity for respect for the work at every level, and recognizing the need for all of the work that's being done.
Commissioner, I'll just jump in. This is Michelle at United Way, and I would just say, we are always interested in improving the collaboration and in the use of the dollars. I think we can't ignore the fact that we have a continuum of care that has a plan, and we want to make sure that their voices are heard, and so that we know, both from a perspective of foundations and other funders like United Way, but also the governmental entities, that we all understand what the plan is, and that we're all working together to make sure that that's happening.
Out of crisis comes, as both Michelle and Julie have reinforced, comes greater cooperation. I think the challenge for all of us is that as we move along in the various phases of this crisis, how to maintain and how to strengthen the bond of collaboration. We are taking full advantage right now of the fact that the need for people to work together, and they don't have to like one another, but the need to work together is so critical. And it's been evidenced so many times over the course of the last 10 weeks. So I do have, with being a member of the K-Connect's Housing Stability Alliance, is that it's been a struggle, and but I'm seeing somewhat some loosening of being so strident in that struggle. I'm seeing some grace being provided. So I'm hopeful, Commissioner Talon, that we can slide through this and come out with a great recommendation, or a recommendation that works over the long term in June.
Commissioner Womack.
Yes, I'd just like to thank the Steelcase Foundation, United Way, and Grand Rapids Community Foundation for their presentation. And I'd like to go back to something that Diane Seeger mentioned about the direct cash assistance. That's one of the programs that had immediate impact from the foundation's collaborative work there. And as she mentioned, their process with 6 questions, it was something that hit our community that people began to talk about. We spoke about in our about some of the applications can be very hard on people who are already going through homelessness or people who are on lower paying jobs or factory work where it may not their college education to get that job. So they may not be, and also them not being familiar with getting on computers and laptops and may have to use someone else's laptop or computer. Some of them are using their phones because the libraries are closed and places they could go get Wi-Fi, even certain restaurants that provided it. So that impact was one of the first positive impacts against the COVID-19 shutdown that truly helped the community, as some people were in between waiting their stimulus check. So I just want to let them know that their work is highly appreciated. It hasn't come through our community. If our community hasn't had a chance to thank you, I want to thank you as one of the voices of my community. The 49507 zip code, which I live in, is one of the most highly impacted. It is the most highly impacted when it comes to testing. I have a niece that has COVID-19, an uncle that has COVID-19. I have a family member that doesn't live in Grand Rapids that died of COVID-19. But just going through the community and getting calls from more and more people who have COVID-19, there's a lot of bad news during this storm, but I know our God said there'll be a rainbow after every storm. I just want to thank you once again for that direct assistance cash that help with food and housing. I feel you have really hit it upon the head what those needs are, which mean your foundations and the people that work with you and for you are definitely in contact with the community, and that's definitely part of the rainbow that we're looking at during this storm that I know we will come through. So once again, just want to thank you for all you're doing. Once again, those were very important as people waited for their stimulus package to get there, and some of those who are ineligible for stimulus because they did not file taxes the last 2 years, if they did have a job, someone who recently got a job this year, January or late December, they weren't getting a stimulus package. So this was a life or death situation. I think it's also helped to make sure that crime didn't go up in my area and community. And you may think that because you had to divide it up upon so many people, and it might have been a $1,200 package. Most of the people received $500 or less than $1,000, but I can tell you they were very, 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 very thankful. So once again, I want to thank you for the community.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I have one final thing, and then we do need to move on because we're past an hour and we're only halfway through our agenda. I just want to be clear that what I have heard from other members in this community related to the sheltering issue is that, just to kind of confirm this, that we moved families out of the shelter that we had set up, which was Mel Trotter, to hoteling for the purposes of social distancing them and making sure that they're not sharing a bathroom and they're not in a communal setting. It's my understanding that your organizations were the ones that initially covered those costs, and you've covered them for quite some time. And I know that there is a looming deadline to continue to cover that cost coming up at the end of this month. So I guess I just want to kind of confirm that with you, or if you have any other light you want to shed on that specific issue before we let you go.
Yes, Chair, you're exactly right. We did move those families from Mel Trotter to hotels. It is specifically COVID related, so that we could socially distance them. There is no other place for them to go to keep them safe at this point. Mel Trotter is full at this point. We did fund this through corporate donations as well as foundation donations and through the Coronavirus Response Fund. All of that, we just had funding come from multiple places, but you're right. We're in an emergency situation at this point because we're days away from running out of that funding.
Okay, I just wanted to highlight that. mainly because that's kind of the immediate hemorrhage right now in terms of the housing payment issue. So I just wanted to be sure that our subcommittee members again picked up on, I mean, you did mention it, Michelle, but I want to highlight that's the immediate concern at this point. So
it's an immediate need, and it is COVID related, to your earlier point.
Okay. Great. Well, with that, I so appreciate you. I know our whole community does, but what an amazing testament to our community that you were all able to step up and set this step up so quickly and kick out $12 million so quickly and streamline process and expedite process. And we just very much appreciate you and want to continue to partner as you see things again on the ground. As we mentioned to our previous presenters, we just know that this community will step up. We will be stepping up as a county, and we want to work arm in arm with you to get this thing figured out. So with that, thank you so much for your time and all your work, and we'll chat soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 5 of our agenda, we have an update on the COVID-19 expenses for the county and sources and uses of the funds report. Am I turning that over to Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff Dode.
Good morning, everyone. So if there's the first item, this is the current county expenses through last Wednesday. We broke out some of the items as requested and added a few footnotes. You can see within outstanding POs, we're at about 3.8 million, just over, in total expenses thus far. So I don't know if there's any specific questions on that. Our next step is to tie these expenses to the funding sources spreadsheet that we showed you last Thursday. We don't have an update for that quite yet.
Just wanted to footnote, Commissioner Steck in particular wanted to have an explanation of some of those expenses. You'll see those footnoted as Jeff mentioned. Thank you, Jeff.
Sure, correct. And then again, the goal is to tie these out to the funding sources spreadsheet that was developed last week. It's not quite ready yet. Hopefully we'll have a start on that for Thursday.
Okay.
The second item is the other Kent County COVID-19 funding sources and uses. What do we have up on the screen? I have the summary page in front of me. And it lists 7, 8.
There it is, yeah.
So we continue to build out this spreadsheet as well with the help of Sandra and Jen from Wayman's office. So we're going to continue to track all of these sources and uses of funds from other external sources outside of Kent County proper. So I don't know if there's any specific questions on that.
Just a point to make a point that several of these funds that the Finance Committee approved this morning will be coming to the board in its next meeting. So the CSBG's CARES Act, ESG CARES Act, and so forth. CDBG CARES Act funding was approved this morning. Wanted to make sure you are catching that.
I think this is very useful, and I hate to ask for one more document, but in terms of just a visual for our subcommittee members and our full board, is there a way to provide maybe like a landscape flow chart of, here's CDBG CARES Act money, the 1 million, and then like boxes underneath it of what that's going to cover, and here's CARES,
sure.
And just so we can see it on one page.
Sure.
This is good because this will talk about, where it comes from, how much it is. This is a great just inventorying of the funds coming in, which we needed, and thank the staff for all that work. But now I think as we move into phase 2 of how we're going to formulate where these are going, I think we need to see kind of the buckets and boxes of what's that would be great.
Yes, we can do that.
Do I have any questions or comments for Jeff on any of these documents? I mean, we've seen these, they're continuing to be propagated and continue to be enhanced. Any questions or comments? I don't see any hands up. Oh, Stan Steck.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just as a follow-up, as we move forward to starting to make decisions about allocations, it would be helpful for me, and I hope for others, if we can begin to start to compartmentalize these asks, these areas into larger groups. So it's a little bit hard to handle the overall spectrum of everybody asking, but we know that there are certain subsets of business requests, housing requests, foundation requests, mental health requests. So to begin to start identifying what are the subsets of
Yep.
of categories.
Yeah,
So,
Commissioner, we've talked, Wayman and I have talked, and Steve Duarte and I have talked. We will have that on Tuesday. We will begin to kind of break down the buckets of requests and try to figure out where we want to and how much we want to allocate for each.
good.
So that should be coming. We've got one more presentation on Thursday from the Right Place, and we may have one other group coming. And then at that point, moving forward, we have gotten requests for other groups, but their individual, professions, and I just feel like, we heard today that the sheltering has a deadline of 9 days from now. I know that there's a major PPE request. If we continue to drag this out, we're, pushing back those orders that need to go in. So I want to continue to move forward. So yeah, we will have that sketch out and begin to do that on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on item 5 before we move on? I don't see any here. No hands, says Pam. All right, we're going to move on to item 6, Kent COVID-19 sources and uses of funds report.
Yeah, that's Jeff also. So Jeff, you want to take that one?
Yeah, we kind of already covered it. It was up on the screen a minute ago. So
Okay,
this
good.
is the other external sources.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so next time we can put that into the same agenda item.
Yep.
All right, number 7, additional documents and correspondence.
Yeah, Madam Chair, there's a couple of communications we received, and I wanted to make sure that you all saw that. This one in particular from the Black Impact Collaborative, a group of Black community leaders that have a 5-page letter that was written to Chair Boulder and myself. Wanted to make sure you all were aware of that. We've requested that they present themselves, present more detail to the subcommittee on Thursday of this week. We have not received a response back yet, but the hope is that they would be available to provide additional comment and detail.
Where would we find that document? I don't remember seeing it.
That document was provided yesterday, I believe, late, Pam. Is that correct?
Yes, I think I emailed that yesterday, late afternoon.
Yes. And so we will make sure that all of these documents reside in the SharePoint file folder that we spoke of. We do have that folder created now. So all of these documents will reside there.
Can you walk through how we access that, please?
MB, can you explain? You're muted. Could you unmute?
So after this meeting, Natasha and Pam will be reaching out to all of the members and sending them a link that will require a one-time passcode, but that passcode will also be sent to you in a separate email. We'll be working through this one by one with each of you to make sure that we get this set up and that you can access it easily.
Is there a way we can just put a folder in our email system, or is there a way we can, is that the best way? That's the easiest way to go, huh? Okay.
Well, this is Commissioner Steck. I do have a folder as well, but I'm not sure I get it all in. So that's why it'd be great if we had sort of a central depository where we know everything is.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get that last question from Chair Boulder, MB?
I did not, sorry.
Is there a way to put it in our email system? Is there like in the Outlook, is there a separate folder, or where, or do we have to log in every time to?
It should be, and that's what we've been playing around with and trying to figure out how it works. It should be a link that you will always be able to go to. It's part of the Office 365 suite, so it's not specific to Outlook, but it is part of our Office suite. You won't have to log in every time. It's a one-time. The very first time you'll have to put in a passcode. That after that the link will work for you.
Okay, and I want to be sure that we're making it available to the entire board and not just subcommittee members.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, any other questions or comments on item 6 before we, or I'm sorry, on item 7 before we move on to miscellaneous?
There was, Madam Chair, there was another letter that we received from Doug Small from Experience Grand Rapids. I also wanted to make you aware of that. That will also be listed in the
Okay.
folder.
A-
Okay.
And I, if we could go back to the agenda, I do want to again reiterate, and I know it's confusing, and we have the council available to help us feed through this, but these funds have to additional expenses. We cannot use them for revenue loss. I know that's something Commissioner Jones has mentioned in finance at times, because we are gonna experience losses in various areas because of COVID. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is the guidance we've been given. And so I just want to, you know, again, reiterate that as we continue to move through this process, we need to continually think of, as the requests come in, we can't plug revenue losses. Looks like Commissioner Talon has a comment.
Question, Chair Bolter. Are we on miscellaneous or still on?
No, we're still on item 7.
All right, I'll
But
wait
we're
till
gonna move to
miscellaneous.
miscellaneous. You want me to move you?
Sure.
Moving on to miscellaneous, Commissioner Talon.
Can you give us some sense of a timeline for what's coming up? I have some frustration in talking with people about when we'll be having conversation about this, when we expect to make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Can you give us any sense of that?
So a lot of this was dictated based on other funds that were coming in and when they were coming in and the guidance we were getting for them. As I mentioned at the beginning of this whole process, there are so many different funding sources coming into the county. And my initial concern was that we were going to hurry up and kick out CARES money, which is less restrictive, and then find out later that we have additional funds that could have been applied to those recipients that are more restrictive. So we're trying to continue to collaborate. What we're finding is I think we've got a really good handle as all the time we've spent and the staff time and all the documents we've been given. We're getting our arms around kind of a bigger picture of what's coming into the system. I will mention that I do think, and I would propose, and I would like to do it on Thursday's subcommittee. I think that it's fairly obvious that we all need to figure out a PPE effort for this community. I do know that staff has started to do that. If we don't vote to move that forward this week, if we wait until the subcommittee makes all the other recommendations to the full board, we would potentially lose a month's worth of buying power. And so I would throw that out there as a consideration to the subcommittee. I know that staff is working on a plan. I believe they will be presenting it for PPE specific, the PPE specific issue on Thursday, but I would like us to move forward with that. I would also like to ask staff to figure out what we're going to do with this looming shelter bill for May 28th, what funds could be applied, and we may need to consider that. So in my mind, those are the immediate deadlines that probably need to be addressed before the subcommittee. Moving forward with the subcommittee, as I said to Commissioner Steck, my intention after Thursday is to start developing our sketch out of our plan. What are the different buckets, for lack of a better word, that we want to start to distribute these funds. We should also have our municipal report by Thursday, or at least by Tuesday, at latest Tuesday, to determine how much funding all of our municipalities need, and if we want to cover those costs. We have never really discussed for sure that we want to cover all those, so that needs to be voted on. And then hopefully next week or the following, we will be making our recommendations to the full board. So that is kind of my hope. That's the timeline. It's aggressive, but we have spent a lot of time on this in terms of couple days per week, and staff has been spending almost all their time on it. So, Commissioner Talon.
That's helpful, thanks. And I don't know that anybody said this. I just want to recognize that this is, this is like half of our general fund tax revenue that we collect, and we spend a lot of time figuring out how we're going to use those dollars. I think this is well warranted to put a lot of due diligence into this, and I appreciate your pushing us to do that. Thanks.
Yep, and I want to do due diligence, but I also don't want people to have to wait for relief. So we are doing that delicate balance, and we will continue to do that. And we do have the luxury of, you know, the people who presented today, they've done that due diligence. They know where we're at on things. They, you know, our foundations know exactly the need and where we're at. And Commissioner Steck.
Thank you, Chair. I may be somewhere between where we are in the agenda and miscellaneous.
We're on
So,
miscellaneous.
okay, good. Well, I love to pontificate. That's great stuff.
We know.
What I'm looking for is, you know, there are communities all over the country that are wrestling with the same issue that we are to some extent, and I know that this fund's sort of been pushed out there with some direction, but not a lot, and I'm direction or regulations or responses from the federal authorities with respect to this that might give us more current explanation for the scope of how we can apply it?
Madam Chair, we've received the FAQ from the federal. That was the last document that we received from the feds. We received the guideline and then the FAQ. And we boiled that FAQ down into, and the guidelines into like a 1.5-page summary for the committee. So that's the latest that we received. In addition to that, we received information from other municipalities, other jurisdictions around the country, Phoenix being one. We've also benchmarked Oakland County, Macomb County, Wayne County. Intel in-house. We just received information from Macomb. Macomb is behind us. They have not yet. They've just started the process that you all are going through. So we're a little bit ahead. I think we're in a better position. We are pulling information as we can get it. The team has an updated report. We can provide that to you. That will be in the full and what's being provided, but we're not receiving any more direction from HUD, from a federal government CARES Act.
All right, thanks. And I've seen the FAQ, and I'd be a little surprised that NACO doesn't have a team that's possibly looking at that, or maybe they are, and we don't
One of
have
the other
that.
things that we can double check. There are multiple different communications that we're seeing from NACO. We pulled in an outside firm, Warner, to also assist us with that. So with what we are pulling, but we do not have any new or better information that I'm pulling from NACO or anywhere else like that. It's just, I think we're all struggling with it.
And I will say it's nice to get that guidance. The time we've spent on this, we're hearing what the need is, and we're formulating that. So I do want to say, though, that I do hope we engage Warner a little bit more next week as we start to move through options and legal options. We're going to need, you know, probably some sort of formalized agreements between groups, and we're going to, you know, additionally, I want to make sure that we are double checking that we can engage someone to do an audit and have that as part of our plan.
We can have Warner also be, they're on the call. They were on the call last week as well. So they can give us an update and give us any kind of
I just want to be sure we're really utilizing them, because that they can also take the time to look around and see possible creative uses and needs across the country. So, all right, it looks like Commissioner.
Can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
Again, the consequences of us doing this wrong, though, could be fairly substantial. Excuse me. If we're spending the money in an unauthorized way, my guess is that ultimately there's a payback obligation that might be saddled on us. So that's why I think it's critical that we do as much as we can to make sure that we know the scope of what we can do.
Yes.
Great. Commissioner Womack.
Yes, I'd just like to add on to what Madam Chair stated about these funds being earmarked for COVID-19 related programs that can help interrupt the spread of coronavirus and the impact of economically on this community and businesses. And I was wondering, I'm just putting it out there, I don't need an answer now, but I would like to start finding out how some of the groups are hearing about our CARES Act situation, so we could maybe use whatever way they're finding out about it to start funneling a little more information. As the chair said today, we had some great presentations by philanthropical members of the community. But I've been hearing a lot of people who have either wrote me or approached me or emailed me about the CARES Act, and a lot of them I have to send out emails to and let them know that they need to read up upon the CARES Act. I've also sent them some links to the CARES Act, federal links to how it describes how we have to spend this money to keep them updated so that they don't waste their time or ours, because we don't have any time to waste in this pandemic. But I do that without, trying to deter people from what they're trying to do, but just so that they can get educated. And if they do present themselves, they'll be able to present themselves something within the framework of the CARES Act. So it'd be nice to find out how some of the groups are hearing about our CARES Act patch that's here with the Kent County Commissioners Board, so that more people can be aware of exactly what these funds are.
And that's a great point, Commissioner. And I know that you're such a leader in that, getting that information out to one of our most affected communities as well. So I know that that's not lost on you. We have one of the best marketing organizations in the world called Experience Grand Rapids, and I hope that we can somehow engage them as well to get the word out too. So I have down for next week, Right Place, a PPE presentation, a presentation on the municipal costs and updates on the grant documents.
Yes.
I'd like to get through that.
You mean
fairly
this Thursday?
quickly.
You mean this Thursday, not next week Thursday?
Yeah, this Thursday,
Yeah.
next meeting. Yeah. I don't see any other hands raised. I don't see any other miscellaneous.
Mandy, it's Diane. Before we leave, when
Diane.
are we going to potentially vote on getting some of this money allocated? And my understanding from what you just said is we're going to go to full board and not a committee first. Is that correct as well? Can we do some voting on Thursday, given the needs we have?
I would like us to consider voting on the PPE proposal if we get one on Thursday. I know staff has been doing work on it, but we need to see it.
Yeah. We have the, yeah.
And can I just say, even though that this is a potential PPE proposal we're going to get on Thursday, this may be one PPE, like first PPE proposal. There may be multiple, conditional, continuance of that, but just to get something pushed out quickly from what we know. Wayman?
Yeah, within the resolution that the board provided on 3/26 to the administrator, the authority to access these funds for parent need. So we have the ability to have chair and the vice chair, minority chair, be involved with the decision for this PPE and any other matter that's above 250,000. So this is what I will be recommending that we do to the board chair regarding PPE this week. And she's mentioning Thursday. At that time, we'll have the ability to share that information, answer any questions you have. But in addition to that, she's mentioned something about the parent need for families in shelter at our hotel. So those two items will be ready to present to the board chair, and we will not need to take that through the board process given the authority that you provided me back in late March.
Do we have questions or comments on that at all?
And we will reiterate that with the resolution, so you have that in front of you as well.
Okay. All right, seeing no more hands raised for miscellaneous, we're gonna move on to public comment. Again, that was public comment at kentcountymi.gov. Any emails, Pam, that we received or any hands up today in the meeting?
Let me check the email box a minute here. There are no emails in the inbox.
Okay, no hands up? No one in chat? Doesn't look like it.
Nope.
All right, we are adjourned for today. We will see you all Thursday. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.